The best advice I have is don't do something in preparation for divorce out of fear that will accidentally hit the war bell.
For many families that own small businesses, the prospect of a divorce can be daunting. There is certainly a lot to be concerned about. Today, I have Melinda Eitzen here to talk about how the collaborative divorce process can really help families come up with creative solutions as they navigate divorce. Melinda is a partner in the law firm of Duffy and Eitzen here in Dallas, serving all of North Texas. She's also a master-level credentialed collaborative divorce specialist, and she is the author of two books, one on the topic of collaborative divorce and one also that is just a great primer on divorce. It's called Considering Divorce. So, Melinda, I'm really excited to have you here today to talk about all things divorce, but especially talk about issues facing families who own small businesses. Welcome.
Thank you, Jennifer. I'm glad to be here.
So, before we get started in talking about small businesses, tell us how you came into the collaborative divorce process.
So in 2001, I think it was 2001, two lawyers, Larry Hance and someone else, I think John McShane, brought a collaborative trainer here to Texas. And Larry called me and said, "Hey, we're going to have this training and you need to come." And I really had no idea what I was going to or what it was about. But I went to the training, and it was a 2-day training, I think, a basic. And as I was sitting there, I just had such an aha moment of, oh my gosh, why aren't we already doing it this way? And then I ran around the room and found people I had cases with and said, the case we just started, let's do it collaborative. So I think I had the first collaborative case in Dallas.
So up until that time, you were a divorce attorney. You had been representing lots of families in more of a traditional litigation process. Is that right?
What? I still do that. I really serve in both models, whether it's collaborative or litigation or mediation. But I think collaborative is the process of choice.
What was it when you were sitting in that training? What was it that really spoke to you that where you saw the potential and possibilities for helping families in a different way?
I think that this will not sound revolutionary to people who weren't doing litigation, but what is so amazing about collaborative is it allows people to get divorced with honor and with self-respect and to be their higher selves, instead of feeling like they have to throw dirt and talk about all the failings of their spouse.
I love that. It really helps families focus on the future. And, what I say is that it's possible to have a divorce that's consistent with your values, and people who get a divorce still value family. And I think this is a process that really allows them to move into that next chapter. Let's talk about families who have small businesses. What ways can the collaborative divorce process really help them?
That's a great question. So a lot of my practice does involve people who own a business, and often it's their primary asset. And instead of building up a 401k or having a stock portfolio, they're putting all their assets into this business. They're just reinvesting in their family business and sometimes hoping to pass it on to future generations. So that it's very important typically to at least one of the couple, one party, to have that business continue. And what I like about collaborative is it allows us to really have a problem-solving approach to how to maintain that business and keep at least one party in it. I've had some cases where they both stay in it post-divorce, but still get the other party, the person who doesn't want to stay in the business and wants some money, how to get them some value.
I love that. When we do a collaborative case, one of the first things we start off is asking people what their goals are in the divorce process. And I think especially for people who are small business owners, really being able to give voice to the fact that, they're coming into the divorce process with a lot of fears and worries and concerns. And we can really address a lot of those concerns in the divorce process. What are some fears that you see that your clients are struggling with when they are facing divorce and they own a small business?
Well, I think they're worried about, do I have to sell my business, right? That's the immediate question. But even if they feel pretty confident that's not going to happen, or I assure them that I don't think we have to do that, they're worried about disruption to the business. And as we gather information, if we need to gather information in order, for example, to value it, if that's part of what they decide in the process needs to happen, that process of gathering information in litigation can be very disruptive to the business. And we're pulling people off of their tasks running the business to gather information. And in litigation, it can be combative, where they're taking depositions of people, in management in the business. So it's very relieving to people to hear that we don't have to approach it that way. We can gather the information that we need without being as disruptive.
That's such a good point. I think too, one of the things that happens in the litigation context is, the divorce can impact employees, relationships with employees. Employees catch wind and they're, a buzz. It can also impact relationships with clients or with other vendors, whoever you're dealing with in the business. And one of the great things about collaborative is it's confidential. So what's happening in the divorce really stays within the divorce. And I think the couple has a lot more control over the message that they're sending. So they don't have to worry about, the destructive gossip rumor mill that happens in a litigation context. How have you seen families come up with creative solutions in a family business context?
Well, one thing that I think some people assume is that we would always value the business, for example. And that can be very expensive, and we would typically hire a neutral. And in many cases, we do this. We hire a neutral, and they come in, and their job is to value the business. Well, some people don't want to do that. They don't want to bear the expense of it. And collaborative allows us to say, well, what do you think it's worth? And if they both agree on what they think that value is worth, we do not have to bear that expense and trouble.
Which is Yeah, I mean, that's great because, you don't have to hire a business valuation expert at all. I think a lot of people don't realize in a divorce, typically, if we're in a litigation context, each side is hiring their own business valuation expert. So not only do you have one, you don't have just the intrusive process of one business valuator, going through all your records and interviewing all the key people, but now you have it happening twice, and you end up with a battle of the experts. And I love that in collaborative we can really avoid that because if we do hire, it's you hire one, and you refer to that as the neutral, but that's where both parties just hire one expert to value the business. But you're right. I mean, there are lots of times when we don't even have to do the value. What do you see? I mean, have you seen some creative ways to divide interest in a business, maybe versus what we see in litigation, like how business interests do get divided?
Yes, I mean, it of course depends on the nature of the business. And is there something that could be sold, a piece of it, to fund the other person's value that they're trying to get out of it? So let's just do a hypothetical. Let's say that the wife is really the one running the business, and she wants to maintain that role, and she wants to stay in the business and preserve as much of it as possible. The husband doesn't have a problem with that, but he wants money right out of it, and that's their main asset, because in my example earlier, they just keep reinvesting in it. Well, we need to identify, is there some small piece of the business, maybe it owns some real estate, that we could just sell a portion of it to try to get some value to the husband. Maybe we do a combination of some value in cash or by sale of something, and then a stream of payments over time. Because in many cases, they are cash positive. It's not that the business isn't doing well. It's that they just keep putting money back in and making it bigger and better. So I've had many cases where we just have a stream of payments in that example going to the husband, and we secure that stream of payments by the assets of the business.
As you're talking, it brings to mind the fact that one of the great things about the collaborative divorce process is we actually have a team. And so each side is represented by their own lawyer, but then we have a neutral financial expert usually, and usually a neutral mental health professional. And the power of the team all working together to come up with creative solutions is something that I think is so advantageous in the collaborative divorce process, because we can brainstorm and come up with all kinds of scenarios. And, every business is different. I mean, you mentioned that earlier, and every family is different, and, their level of involvement post-divorce is going to be different too. So I think that that's a great thing. Tell us what, in terms of like post-divorce success that you've seen with families who own businesses. I mean, a lot of times a divorce can be a devastating event, and that it can make the business go belly up. How have you seen businesses thrive after divorce?
I think that it really comes down to, do they have respect and trust in each other even though they're getting divorced? And do they have enough respect and trust that they can problem solve and be successful post divorce on how we're getting value from from the business to the other person? I have had cases where they continue to both work in the business. That doesn't seem ideal in most cases, but if it's a business where there's more than one location, or both of them were actively working in it and their duties were very defined and different, then I have seen that be successful. And they were invested in it, and maybe their kids were already working in the business in that instance. So they were successful in keeping that going. But in most cases, one person does want to be removed and go on with their life. But they are invested in that business being successful, because that's how they're going to get paid out eventually.
Right.
And
Yeah.
we need to also be creative in leveraging. Like, there might be abilities to get a loan and just buy them out now and not have to do that stream of payments. It just depends on, how creative we can get with getting a lender involved who might be able to help us.
Now, a lot of people think that, collaborative divorce is for people who don't have any conflict, that they've already pretty much agreed on everything, and so they can come into this collaborative divorce process. What is your experience in terms of working with levels of conflict and even, trust? I mean, you just were talking about couples who trust each other, but if you're not completely trusting of your spouse, can you still work in the collaborative divorce process?
Oh, absolutely. To me, it's the better process for almost any instance. And I have had really high conflict, like slamming the door so hard to the conference room that I thought the glass in the door was going to break, and really misbehaving between meetings. So they do not. I had one case, we had 14 meetings, which is very unusual. That's a large amount of meetings. And between the meetings, one of the two did everything bad you could ever do. And they never spoke at all between the meetings. So they had no trust, no respect, but they still valued the process because of the privacy element. It was very important to them to keep their divorce details private from the rest of the community. And from the creative solution, they didn't want the cookie cutter approach that we see from the courts sometimes. So we can deal with high conflict and high emotion and no trust. In that case, we had one person buy a house without agreement that nobody knew about in the middle of the case. But we found out because we had a neutral financial professional that was looking at all the records every month. So there's definitely trust but verify.
It is, it just brings to mind the fact that, because when I hear people say, oh, collaborative isn't for me because I don't trust my spouse, or we have a lot of conflict. What comes to my mind are the litigation cases that go on for years and years and years. And, I don't think people realize right now, in terms of privacy, courts have always been public forums, and that means that anybody can go walk into a courtroom and hear, the dirty details. But now more than ever, our court battles aren't just in the courtroom, they're on YouTube, at least where we practice. And so it is readily available for people to watch from their own living rooms. They don't have to pay for parking downtown at the courthouse. And that privacy element is so important. What advice do you have if somebody's watching this and they have a business and they're thinking that divorce may be in their future? What tips or advice do you have for them? Besides, I will say they should buy your book and read Considering Divorce. It's chock full of good tips. But
yes, they're on Amazon. No, the best advice I have is don't do something in preparation for divorce out of fear that will accidentally hit the war bell. And what I mean by that, a great example is moving money. I can't tell you, and I'm sure you've seen it too, Jennifer, how many times I've seen where, with a lawyer's advice, actually, out of fear, they move half the money out of all the accounts, personal accounts, business accounts, because they're afraid the other person's going to. But what they've done is they've hit a war bell. Now we're going to war because that person is so angry that they did that. And we can't often recover from that. Now we've set the stage for war for the whole case. And in truth, you didn't need to take half the money because if the other, out of fear, because we have remedies if the other person did that. So the way I say it to people is, hey, if you could last for 2 weeks, you could live, you could borrow money from a friend, you could live off your credit cards. If you could last for 2 weeks financially, I can get the money back. So you don't need to do something out of fear that hasn't happened, right? You don't need to do a fear-based beginning move. Don't do it. And then the other advice I have is don't have an affair because that just makes everybody so mad. But if you've already had an affair and it's active and you don't want to stop, then my advice is be discreet. So don't bring the affair partner to the soccer game for your child because that just makes everybody really angry. And then it makes it harder to resolve your case and more expensive.
that is some really good and practical advice. I think so often people are in a state of fear when they're entering into the divorce process. And, they probably may hire a lawyer out of fear thinking I need to have the biggest, meanest, baddest lawyer. And what I often tell people is, the problem is that meanest, baddest lawyer is really good at collecting fees and creating conflict and not helping find a resolution. So it's so refreshing to speak with another like-minded lawyer who really understands that there is tremendous value for our families in helping them get through the divorce process in a way that doesn't escalate conflict and escalate fear. Because really, at the end of the day, we're going to take the assets, we're going to find a way of dividing them that makes sense. But hopefully, your family will continue on. It's just in a different format. Melinda, thank you so much for taking time. I do want to do a quick plug. Tell us where people can learn more about you and your website, and where can they get information about your books?
Oh, thank you so much. So Duffy and Eitzen is spelled Duffeeand. Eitzen is EITZEN.com. That's our website. And both books are on Amazon, and you can just Google by my last name, which is EITZEN, to find those, and hopefully they'll be of help.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, and it's been a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here.